Hi guys, tonight we're gently stepping into a part of World War II that rarely appears in documentaries or headlines. It's a quiet corner of history where thousands of men, despite physical disabilities, still found ways to serve when the world needed them most. In the calm moments ahead, we'll slowly explore how determination, quiet courage, and the wish to help shaped lives that often went unnoticed. This won't be dramatic or intense, just a soft walk through a forgotten chapter of human strength. Before we get started, if you enjoy exploring hidden corners of history at a slower pace, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. I'd love to connect with you there. When the war began, militaries around the world faced a simple but painful rule. Many men were turned away because of physical conditions that made frontline combat unsafe. Some had injuries from childhood, others lived with chronic illnesses, and many carried the long-term effects of accidents or earlier service. For a time, it seemed these men would remain on the sidelines, watching as their friends and brothers went off to fight. But as the months passed, something subtle began to shift. In small towns, cities, and even remote countryside communities, disabled men quietly asked a single question that would reshape their lives. Is there any way I can help? And slowly, answers began to appear. Governments realized they needed far more than soldiers. They needed minds, hands, patience, organization, and skill. And so new pathways opened, not through loud announcements, but through calm conversations in recruiting offices, letters from local officials, and suggestions passed between neighbors. For many disabled men, this was the first sign that service didn't always mean marching or carrying a rifle. It could mean repairing radios, tracking supplies, teaching younger recruits, managing offices, and doing work that kept armies moving long before they reached the battlefield. One of the earliest opportunities came from civil defense programs. These groups needed volunteers who could organize shelters, guide civilians during air raid drills, check blackout curtains, and distribute supplies. Even men with limited mobility could take on leadership roles that required steady thinking rather than physical strength. Small teams were formed, often led by people who had never imagined themselves in uniform. Another quiet doorway opened in communication work. Radio operations, decoding messages, and maintaining equipment required focus and technical skill, not physical perfection. Many disabled men discovered they had a natural talent for calm, detailed work, and military offices began to rely on them to keep information flowing smoothly. As this change spread, workshops and factories also saw an opportunity. Skilled craftsmen with disabilities were hired to build aircraft parts, test electronics, sew uniforms, and repair damaged equipment shipped back from the front. Their contribution wasn't measured in miles marched, but in the quiet precision of their hands. And slowly, a gentle truth began to settle across the home front. Service could take many forms, and every one of them mattered. For the first time, disabled men who once feared they had no place in the war effort began to feel a sense of purpose again. They were needed, not for what they couldn't do, but for everything they could. And in the soft footsteps of this realization, their journey into service quietly began. As the war continued to expand, the need for organized support at home grew larger, and disabled men slowly found themselves stepping into roles that kept their communities steady during uncertain days. For many of them, mornings began not with the sound of marching boots, but with the gentle hum of routine tasks that required patience rather than strength. One of the most important areas where they quietly made a difference was logistics. Armies depended on an endless flow of supplies, food, medical kits, uniforms, spare parts, fuel, and countless small items that soldiers needed just to get through one more day. This complex system didn't run by itself. It needed people who could track shipments, label crates, record changes, and ensure nothing went missing. Disabled men, especially those with experience in clerical work before the war, found they could manage these responsibilities with calm accuracy. Inside warehouses and makeshift offices, they spent long hours organizing paperwork, checking inventory lists, and helping direct supplies from one location to another. Some handled typewriters with a steady rhythm that set the pace of entire operations. Others read maps, planned routes for trucks, or coordinated delivery schedules. Their work rarely made headlines, but commanders depended on them more than anyone realized. Without these quiet workers, frontline units often risked running out of essentials. Another area that opened its doors to disabled volunteers was training support. Military camps were filled with young recruits, many only just out of school, who needed guidance not only in drills but also in the simple routines of camp life. Men who couldn't serve in combat but had experience from earlier service or civilian jobs were invited to help. Some taught basic map reading, safe equipment handling, or first aid skills. Others supervised practice exercises or demonstrated tasks that required precision rather than speed. Even men with limited mobility could sit with groups of recruits and explain procedures, share advice, or help them prepare for inspections. Their presence created a sense of calm for the younger soldiers, who often arrived anxious and unsure. Disabled mentors reminded them that service was not only about physical strength, but also about discipline, patience, and teamwork. And then there were those who supported the war effort by maintaining records, collecting reports from different units, and storing information that helped officers make decisions. Military offices were often flooded with messages, updates, and requests, and someone had to sort, interpret, and archive it all. Disabled workers filled these spaces with quiet determination, creating order in moments that could easily have become chaos. In these peaceful corners of the war effort, men who once feared they had no role found a steady rhythm, a quiet dignity, and a growing sense of belonging. They saw that service didn't always mean standing on the front line. Sometimes it meant keeping the world behind the line from falling apart. As the war unfolded further, another path quietly opened for disabled men. A path inside the growing network of military workshops, repair centres, and technical depots that kept equipment alive long after battles wore it down. These places didn't resemble the chaos of the front. They were calmer, filled with the soft clatter of tools, the steady tapping of metal, and the patient concentration of people who understood that every repaired item meant one less soldier left without what he needed. Many disabled men had worked with their hands long before the war, as mechanics, electricians, carpenters, metal workers, or radio technicians. When the military realized how valuable such skill was, recruiting officers began sending letters, gently inviting them to take part. For many of these men, stepping into a workshop felt like stepping into familiar territory. They didn't need to march, lift heavy equipment, or endure long nights in trenches. What they needed was attention to detail, a calm mind, and the ability to work steadily at a table or bench. And that was something they could offer. Inside these workshops, rows of damaged radios waited to be coaxed back to life. Cracked wooden rifle stocks needed sanding and strengthening. Helmets arrived bent out of shape, requiring heating and careful reshaping. Engines arrived in crates, needing to be taken apart, cleaned, adjusted, and tested before being sent back into the world. Disabled technicians filled these spaces with quiet confidence. A man who had lost mobility in one leg could still repair wiring with a precision that amazed everyone who watched. Someone with a weakened hand could still inspect circuit boards or fit delicate parts together. Others who struggled with chronic pain found that they could pace their tasks in a way that kept equipment flowing without risking their health. Slowly, these workshops became an essential heartbeat of the war effort. Whenever a tank needed parts, a plane needed replacement wiring, or a truck needed a functioning engine, it was these unseen workers who made it possible. Sometimes they worked in small groups, sometimes alone at neatly arranged stations, each step moving equipment closer to being useful again. Some men developed specializations. One became the expert in repairing field telephones. Another learned how to recalibrate navigation instruments. Another became known for restoring damaged binocular lenses. Their contributions were not loud or dramatic, but every fixed machine saved time, money, and effort, and often lives. More importantly, these roles gave disabled men a renewed sense of identity. For the first time since the war began, many felt needed not out of pity, but because their skills genuinely mattered. They were part of something larger, part of a quiet chain of hands that reached from the home front to the battlefield. And each evening, as they cleaned their tools and prepared to go home, they carried a steady, peaceful pride in knowing that their patient work helped someone far away stay safe for another day. As the war stretched into another year, a quieter but deeply meaningful opportunity opened for disabled men in the realm of administrative and organizational service, work that demanded calm thinking, accuracy, and steady dedication rather than physical strength. Military command centers, local recruitment halls, and civil defense offices were constantly overwhelmed with documents, reports, schedules, maps, and endless lists of names, dates, and requests. And while frontline soldiers fought with rifles, the people in these offices fought with paperwork that determined where supplies went, how units moved, and which families received news from the front. Disabled men became the quiet backbone of these operations. Some began each morning by sorting incoming messages delivered by couriers or telegraph operators. They carefully read, logged and routed every slip of paper so nothing important was misplaced. Others worked long hours at typewriters, creating clear copies of orders, instructions and status summaries that needed to be distributed across different departments. Their work did not rely on physical endurance, but on the kind of patient focus that many disabled men had developed long before the war. One man might spend a full day reviewing shipment records, scanning lines of numbers and initials to spot errors that could delay essential supplies. Another carefully updated personnel files, keeping track of who had been deployed, who was recovering in hospitals, and who needed reassignment. Even tasks like organising meeting schedules or preparing weekly reports were crucial to keeping entire systems from falling into confusion. Many of these men had experience from office jobs before the war, and returning to such work in uniform or in a civilian support role helped them rediscover a sense of routine and self-worth. For some, the quiet of an office was a comforting contrast to the turmoil of the outside world. Pens scratched slowly across paper, adding notes and corrections. Typewriter keys tapped in calm, rhythmic patterns. Telephones rang gently as updates flowed in from nearby bases. Disabled clerks learned to read the tones in officers' voices, to interpret hurried handwriting, and to handle sensitive information with discretion. They weren't just writing numbers or recording requests. They were helping maintain the structure that allowed whole divisions to function. Some of these men even took on supervisory roles. Those with strong organizational instincts guided small teams of volunteers, teaching them how to sort documents, maintain filing systems, and prepare concise summaries. Their leadership was steady, quiet, and often deeply appreciated by younger workers who needed guidance. Over time, officers began to rely on these disabled administrators not just for their tasks, but for their judgment. When confusion arose about a supply list or a misplaced assignment order, it was often one of these men who calmly traced the problem back to its source and offered a clear solution. Their confidence grew with each solved issue, each smoothly handled day. They discovered that service wasn't always measured in miles marched or medals earned. Sometimes it was measured in clear paperwork, organised binders, and well-timed decisions. And in this peaceful rhythm of clerical work, many disabled men found a meaningful place where they could contribute fully, not as exceptions, but as essential parts of the quiet machinery that kept the war effort running. While many disabled men found purpose in offices and workshops, another path slowly opened in the vast world of training and education, where experience mattered far more than physical strength. Military camps across the country were filled with recruits, teenagers who had never worn a uniform, young men who barely understood the routines of discipline, and volunteers who wanted to help but didn't yet know how. These camps needed instructors, guides, patient voices, and steady minds. And gradually, disabled men began stepping into these roles with a quiet confidence that soon became indispensable. Training centres were busy places from early morning until late evening. Recruits marched in formation, practiced drills, studied manuals, and learned to handle equipment. But not all training involved running, climbing, or heavy lifting. There were lessons in map reading, code writing, safe equipment maintenance, field communication, and first aid techniques. Lessons that required explanation, clarity, and calm oversight. Many disabled men had served in earlier conflicts or had civilian experience that could be translated into practical instruction. Some had been mechanics before an accident, others had backgrounds in navigation or radio work, and some had simply lived long enough to develop patience and wisdom. These qualities became invaluable. In one quiet classroom, a man with limited mobility explained how to identify terrain features on a map, drawing slow, steady lines that younger soldiers followed with concentration. In another room, an older volunteer taught recruits how to clean and store equipment properly, showing them the small mistakes that could lead to malfunction in the field. Even those with speech impairments found roles, often working one-on-one with recruits, demonstrating procedures step by step without needing long explanations. Outside, on calmer parts of the training grounds, disabled instructors supervised practice exercises. They didn't run alongside the recruits, but they watched with careful eyes, noting posture, technique, and the timing of movements. When a mistake happened, they offered quiet corrections, helping soldiers avoid injuries or misunderstandings later on. Many recruits gravitated toward these instructors, sensing that they carried not just knowledge but a gentler understanding of struggle. Some recruits felt intimidated by the louder, stricter officers, but disabled instructors often brought a different energy, calmer, more reflective, more grounded. They taught not through intimidation, but through steady example, and the assurance that every skill could be learned with time. There were also men who worked in training administration, organising lesson plans, preparing supplies for classes, or scheduling daily routines. They ensured that instructors had the materials they needed, and that recruits knew where they were supposed to be. Every form, every checklist, every carefully arranged schedule contributed to a smooth and effective training environment. Over time, disabled men who once believed they had no place in the war effort became pillars of these training centres. Recruits learned to trust them, officers relied on them, and the entire system grew stronger because of their presence. They were not on the front lines, but they shaped the very people who would one day stand there. And as they watched new soldiers grow more confident with each passing week, they found comfort in knowing that their guidance, patient, steady, and often deeply personal, played a quiet but essential role in preparing a generation for the challenges ahead. Beyond the training grounds and quiet offices, another space slowly opened for disabled men, a world of communication and message handling, where precision, patience, and consistency mattered far more than physical strength. During World War II, information moved in a constant flow. Messages arrived through telegraph wires, radio waves, couriers, and coded transmissions. Every instruction, update, request, and confirmation depended on someone who could listen carefully, write clearly, and pass information along without error. And in this calm, detailed work, disabled men found a place where their presence truly mattered. Many worked in small radio rooms that hummed softly at all hours. These rooms weren't loud or chaotic. They were usually dimly lit, filled with the glow of equipment and the quiet crackle of radio signals. Operators leaned forward, listening for faint transmissions, adjusting dials with practiced fingers, and recording every word onto long sheets of paper. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably in front of the radio and still perform his duties with exceptional skill. Some operators had physical injuries that kept them from the front, but those injuries never touched their minds or their ability to concentrate. In fact, their steady, focused personalities often made them excel at long shifts where consistency was essential. A single missed number in a coordinate, a single misplaced word in a message, could cause confusion far away, and so the men who handled these tasks approached them with quiet seriousness. Others assisted in decoding work. While they weren't part of the top-secret encryptions handled by elite codebreakers, they worked with field ciphers, daily codes and message logs used by regional commands. Disabled clerks helped rewrite coded slips, organize cipher books, and ensure outdated codes were destroyed properly. Their careful hands and calm approach made them reliable guardians of sensitive information. Some disabled men became messengers within bases. Even if they couldn't walk long distances, they used bicycles, small carts, or simply covered short, manageable routes between offices. They carried sealed envelopes, troop updates, supply requests, or handwritten notes from commanders. Their reliability built trust, and many officers came to know them by name. There were also those who worked on switchboards, connecting calls between departments, relaying urgent requests, and keeping communication flowing smoothly. Switchboard rooms were full of quiet clicking sounds as operators inserted cables into sockets, creating connections between distant voices. A man with limited strength in one arm could still work the board efficiently, and many developed a rhythm that made their motions almost musical. And then there were the night shifts, the calmest hours of all. Disabled workers often volunteered for these shifts, preferring the peaceful silence of late-night duty. Radios whispered faint signals from distant posts. Pens moved slowly across paper. Lamps cast warm pools of light on desks filled with logbooks and equipment. In these hours, the world outside felt far away, and the men on duty felt a quiet pride knowing that communication relied on them until morning. Over time, these disabled communicators became the invisible threads connecting countless operations. Soldiers depended on them without ever knowing their names. Commanders relied on the accuracy of the messages they delivered, and each night, as they stepped away from their desks, they knew they had contributed something essential. A quiet, steady voice in a war that often felt overwhelmingly loud. In this tranquil space of signals and paper, disabled men found not only work they could do, but work that genuinely mattered, helping keep the entire war effort connected across miles, borders, and uncertain days. As the war deepened, one of the most unexpectedly important areas where disabled men found a place to serve was in transportation coordination, a role that didn't require lifting heavy cargo or driving long distances, but instead demanded clarity of mind, calm decision-making, and the ability to keep countless moving parts in quiet harmony. Armies depended on trains, trucks, ships, and even small convoys of civilian vehicles to move everything from food and fuel to medical supplies and replacement parts. Behind every successful delivery stood men who mapped routes, scheduled departures, tracked weather patterns, anticipated delays, and made sure every shipment reached the right destination at the right time. Disabled men stepped into these positions with a sense of purpose that quickly became essential. Each day began with stacks of papers, transport orders, inventory lists, reports from depots, and updates from ports or train stations. Many of these men couldn't serve in the field, but they could sit comfortably at a desk or drafting table, carefully studying all the information placed before them. Some had worked as clerks or bookkeepers before the war, others had backgrounds in railroads, shipping, or warehouse management. These experiences became their tools of service. With pencils, rulers, and maps spread across wide tables, they traced supply routes, checked where roads had been damaged, and monitored which rail lines were free or congested. A man with a chronic leg condition might spend hours charting the safest path for a convoy to avoid known hazards. Another with limited arm strength could still call nearby stations on the telephone, confirm arrival times, adjust schedules, and update records that helped keep the entire system running smoothly. Communication flowed constantly. Trains carried troops and equipment across vast distances, and each journey required careful coordination. Disabled transport clerks monitored every step. When a train left, when it passed through major junctions, and when it reached its final destination. They kept logs with neat handwriting, updating them with small notations that later determined when trucks should be loaded, when ships should leave port, or when supply depots should prepare to unload. Some worked in dispatch offices, where the steady ringing of telephones filled the room. Their task was simple but vital: to bring order to a system that could easily slip into confusion. They answered calls from commanders who needed supplies urgently, then matched those requests with available vehicles. They reassigned trucks that were delayed, rerouted convoys based on new intelligence, and ensured that no route became dangerously overcrowded. Even men with limited mobility found roles managing documentation that followed every shipment. Labels, manifests, hazard notes, and priority markings. They checked each crate's destination with quiet concentration, correcting mistakes before they caused problems miles away. Over time, many became known for their ability to stay calm under pressure. When sudden changes occurred, a bridge collapse, a storm, a delayed train, it was often a disabled clerk who suggested the gentlest, most effective solution. Younger workers admired their steadiness, turning to them for guidance during hectic days. These men weren't seen on the front lines, but their work ensured that the front lines never ran dry. A convoy that arrived safely, a train that carried wounded soldiers back to medical centres, a ship that delivered critical supplies, each quietly reflected their effort. And in the soft rhythm of scheduling, planning, and steady organisation, disabled men discovered a place where their service felt not only useful, but deeply meaningful, helping keep the entire war effort moving forward one careful decision at a time. Among the many quiet spaces where disabled men found their place during the war, few were as steady, meaningful, and profoundly human as the world of community support and civilian safety. While armies fought abroad, towns and cities needed people who could help protect families at home, people who understood calm planning, patient organisation, and the importance of small actions that made life safer for everyone. Disabled men, once unsure if there was any role they could fill, slowly became pillars of these efforts. When air raid precautions became part of everyday life, communities created volunteer groups responsible for maintaining order, guiding civilians and handling emergencies. Many disabled men joined these teams, not because they were physically strong, but because they were steady, thoughtful, and dependable. They inspected blackout curtains to ensure that no light leaked into night skies. They checked shelters, made sure supplies were stocked, and organised rosters so that volunteers took turns watching for warning signals. A man with limited mobility might visit several houses on his street each evening, gently reminding families to cover windows or secure latches on their shelter doors. Another who struggled with heavy lifting could still record attendance lists, distribute pamphlets explaining safety rules, or guide mothers and children to designated gathering points. Their presence reassured neighbours, who often felt calmer knowing that someone familiar was watching over their district. Some disabled volunteers worked as air raid wardens, carrying whistles and flashlights instead of weapons. They patrolled small sections of their neighbourhoods, checking that everyone followed safety guidelines. If a confused elderly resident needed help finding a shelter, or a frightened child refused to leave home, these wardens offered gentle guidance and stayed with them until danger passed. Others served as civilian messengers during drills, carrying written updates between command posts and shelter supervisors. Even men who couldn't travel far still helped from stationary positions, dispatch tables, monitoring radios, or logging reports from patrols. Civil defence centres soon learned that reliability mattered more than speed, and disabled volunteers proved they could maintain steady vigilance throughout long nights. Fire-watching duties also opened opportunities. Many local governments recruited volunteers to monitor rooftops, watching for fires sparked by falling debris. Disabled men who couldn't climb ladders were stationed on lower levels or near equipment rooms, where they checked hoses, maintained tools, and relayed messages to teams above. Their assistance allowed more mobile volunteers to focus on active monitoring, while knowing someone trustworthy was supporting them below. Medical support roles offered additional paths to serve. Men who couldn't participate in combat often helped prepare first aid kits, restock bandages, or organise transport routes for ambulances. Some had medical training from previous jobs, others simply learned quickly and approached tasks with careful dedication. In moments when shelters filled with anxious civilians, disabled volunteers distributed water, comforted children, and kept records of who arrived, and who might still be missing. Their steady presence lowered tensions, especially on nights when sirens echoed in the distance. Over time, these men became essential figures in their communities. People knew their names, trusted their judgment, and appreciated their willingness to help even when their own lives had already been shaped by hardship. Many of these disabled volunteers discovered a quiet strength they hadn't recognized before: the ability to guide, reassure, organize, and protect. And as they walked home after long shifts, moving slowly but with a sense of purpose, they understood that their service was not measured by the distance they could run, but by the comfort and safety they brought to the people who depended on them. As the war pressed on, another quiet but deeply meaningful opportunity opened for disabled men, a place within the world of manufacturing and industrial production. Factories had become the heartbeat of the home front, working day and night to create the tools, uniforms, and essential equipment that soldiers depended on far from home. These facilities didn't require marching, climbing, or heavy combat training. They required steady hands, patient minds, and a willingness to repeat careful tasks with consistent precision. And for thousands of disabled men, this became the gateway to serving in a way that felt both possible and profoundly important. Inside these vast buildings, machines hummed in smooth patterns, conveyor belts moved slowly past long rows of workers, and supervisors walked quietly between stations to ensure everything progressed without interruption. Many disabled men were surprised to discover how welcome they were here. Some factories were specially adapted to accommodate workers with limited mobility, providing seated workstations, adjustable tables, or tools that required minimal physical exertion. A man who couldn't stand for long periods could assemble small electrical components at a seated bench. Another who had lost partial use of one arm could still operate inspection tools or check wiring inside compact parts. Men with chronic pain or restricted movement found roles in quality control, packaging, labeling, and countless other tasks that kept the production lines flowing. Every piece they touched, a button sewn onto a uniform, a switch wired correctly in a control box, a bolt tightened on a small mechanism, mattered deeply to someone miles away at the front. Some factories specialized in aircraft production. Disabled workers inspected sheet metal for dents, checked rivets for tightness, or tested instruments used in navigation panels. Others worked in plants producing radios, field telephones, or medical equipment. They handled every item with slow, deliberate care, knowing that precision was just as important as speed. In textile factories, disabled men cut fabric, measured lengths, dyed cloth in large vats, or monitored spinning machines. Some supervised storage rooms, tracking the flow of materials and documenting how much cloth, steel, rubber, or copper was used each week. Their calm attention ensured that shortages were noticed early, avoiding costly delays. There were also those who stepped into roles maintaining the machines themselves. A man unable to march could still become an expert in oiling gears, replacing belts, or adjusting mechanical settings on production equipment. These maintenance roles were crucial. A malfunctioning machine could slow an entire line, while a well-maintained one helped produce hundreds of items in a single shift. Disabled men who had once worked as craftsmen, mechanics, or electricians in civilian life rediscovered their talents here. The environment felt familiar: the smell of oil, the steady clink of tools, the low conversation of co-workers during brief breaks. They found not only a place to contribute, but also a sense of belonging in teams that valued skill over physical perfection. Many factories created small support groups where disabled workers helped one another adapt to tasks and shared solutions to make the work easier. Some taught co-workers how to modify tools for better grip or comfort. Others organised schedules so that tasks rotated, allowing men with chronic conditions to rest their bodies without slowing production. These workplaces became communities built on mutual support and quiet pride. And each day, as workers left the factory with grease on their hands or small flecks of metal on their sleeves, they carried with them the warm knowledge that their effort, though unseen by soldiers in the field, was woven into every plane that flew, every radio that transmitted, and every medical kit that saved a life. Through patient, meticulous work, disabled men found a role that honoured their abilities and kept the war effort moving forward one completed piece at a time. In another quiet corner of the war effort, disabled men found a place where strength wasn't measured by physical power, but by calm focus, steady observation, and the ability to remain alert for long periods of time. This world belonged to watch stations, monitoring posts, and observation centres, the eyes and ears of the home front. These stations didn't require running, carrying heavy equipment, or operating weapons. They required something softer but equally important: patience, attention to detail, and the discipline to remain steady even during long, uneventful hours. Many disabled men discovered that they were perfectly suited for this environment. Observation posts were set up along coastlines, hills, city edges, and strategic regions across the country. Their purpose was simple: watch the skies, listen for unusual sounds, report anything suspicious, and ensure that communities had time to react to potential danger. Inside these watch stations, the work was quiet, almost peaceful. Volunteers sat at wooden tables with small windows facing open landscapes. Binoculars, field glasses, notebooks, and telephones rested within easy reach. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably at his post for hours, scanning the horizon for the faint silhouette of an aircraft or a distant plume of smoke. He didn't need to climb towers or walk long distances. He just needed to remain attentive. Some observation posts tracked aircraft movements for the Aircraft Warning Service, a program where volunteers identified friendly planes and reported unidentified ones. Disabled men became known for their careful, methodical approach, often noticing details others overlooked. They learned to recognize engine sounds, wing shapes, and altitude patterns. Their notes, recorded with neat handwriting in logbooks, supported larger defence networks that relied on timely information. Other posts monitored coastlines, especially in places where ships passed close to shore. A disabled volunteer who struggled with walking could still sit at a stable perch and watch the sea for signs of distress signals or unusual lights at night. Some monitored radio frequencies, listening for coded messages or distress calls. Their hands gently adjusted dials as soft static filled the room, and their slow, deliberate movements ensured nothing important slipped by unnoticed. There were also inland monitoring stations that focused on weather patterns. Meteorological data was essential for flight planning, convoy movement, and supply shipments. Disabled men measured temperatures, tracked wind direction, and recorded cloud patterns with calm consistency. Their daily reports helped regional commanders anticipate storms or conditions that might delay operations. In urban areas, some disabled volunteers served as lookout coordinators on building rooftops. While they couldn't climb ladders, they supervised younger volunteers who could. These coordinators managed the flow of reports, kept track of shift rotations, and relayed updates to local defence centres. Their calm leadership provided structure during long nights, when vigilance mattered most. Even in the quietest moments, when nothing unusual appeared in the sky or along the coastline, these disabled volunteers understood the importance of what they were doing. Their presence meant that nothing went unnoticed. They offered stability in a time when uncertainty often overshadowed daily life. Many found comfort in the routine, checking equipment, recording timestamps in neat lines, adjusting binocular focus, listening to the hum of distant engines or the faint rustle of wind outside. These watch stations became places of reflection, purpose, and quiet contribution. And although their work rarely made newspaper headlines or received official recognition, the information they gathered rippled outward, influencing decisions, guiding responses, and ensuring communities were not caught off guard. In their patient, steady way, these disabled observers became guardians of calm at a time when the world often felt unpredictable, proving once again that service comes in many forms, and each form matters deeply. As the war continued to reshape daily life, another meaningful opportunity emerged for disabled men. one grounded not in machines or logistics, but in the quiet, steady world of record-keeping and archival work. Armies produced an immense amount of information every single day. Reports from the front, medical summaries, equipment logs, personnel files, supply manifests, strategic maps, and countless smaller notes that passed through the hands of officers, planners, and administrators. This growing mountain of documents needed people who were patient, organized, and able to focus for long stretches of time. Disabled men, many of whom had experience in bookkeeping, library work, or clerical tasks before the war, found that this environment suited them well. They didn't need to march or lift heavy loads. Instead, they brought order to systems that could easily collapse under their own weight. In large archival rooms, rows of shelves were filled with binders, folders, and boxes labelled with dates and locations. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably at a wide table, sorting papers into categories, attaching notes, or preparing documents for long-term storage. Others handled indexing, creating detailed lists that allowed officers to find information quickly, even months after it had been recorded. These tasks required quiet concentration rather than physical strength, and many disabled workers performed them with remarkable consistency. Some men were assigned to casualty record departments, where they documented wounded and missing soldiers. Their work demanded accuracy, empathy, and a calm mind. They read reports sent from field hospitals, updated card files, and forwarded information to families. Even though the subject matter was heavy, these clerks approached it with a sense of responsibility, understanding how important it was that every detail be correct. Others worked in personnel archives, tracking promotions, transfers, and training histories. Their handwriting filled neat columns of ledgers, and their careful updates ensured that officers had clear, up-to-date information on every soldier. Some disabled men found roles in cartography rooms. Even if they couldn't stand for long periods, they could sit at drafting tables and assist cartographers by labelling maps, checking coordinates, and comparing earlier versions with updated intelligence. Their patient eyes often spotted small inconsistencies that needed correction. Communications archives offered additional roles. Every message sent or received by a command centre had to be logged, time-stamped, and stored. Disabled clerks sorted message slips into long drawers, grouped by day and hour. When officers needed to trace the sequence of an event, these men provided the documents with quiet efficiency. There were also archival centres that managed blueprints, equipment manuals, and training guides. Disabled workers checked each page for clarity, repaired torn sections with tape, organised editions by date, and prepared older versions for preservation. The rhythm of the work became almost meditative. The soft turn of pages, the scratch of pencils, the subtle sounds of sorting and filing. Many disabled men took pride in creating order out of chaos. They knew that officers planning missions relied heavily on accurate records. A misplaced report could cause delays, confusion, or even danger. Their care ensured that when information was needed, it could be found quickly and reliably. Over time, these archival rooms grew into quiet sanctuaries, places where the world outside seemed distant, replaced by the steady flow of documents and the gentle structure of routine. The men who worked there, though rarely seen by the public, became guardians of clarity, and each day, as they closed drawers, stacked folders, or placed the final label on a neatly organised box, they understood that their careful hands were shaping the memory and management of the war itself, one precise entry at a time. Beyond the quiet world of archives, another path opened where disabled men found a sense of belonging. The calm, steady environment of supply depots and storage facilities. These places were the lungs of the war effort, breathing equipment, clothing, and essentials in and out with constant rhythm. They didn't resemble battlefields or command posts. Instead, they were large warehouses with tall shelves, labelled crates, and long tables where items were counted, sorted, and prepared for shipment. Here, Men who couldn't march or lift heavy loads discovered they could still make an enormous difference simply by using their minds, their organisation skills, and their patience. Supply depots operated on structure. Every item had a place, and every movement had to be recorded. A single missing box of medical tools or a misfiled set of uniform sizes could create delays miles away. Disabled men quickly became valued for their careful attention and calm approach. Some worked at intake stations where new deliveries arrived from factories or smaller storage points. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably at a desk and check off items against inventory lists, confirming quantities before they were added to shelves. Another might inspect packages for damage, ensuring that broken items were removed before they caused problems later. Men with chronic conditions or limited strength found roles preparing labels, sorting parts into small containers, or updating inventory cards that hung on hooks beside each section of shelving. Their handwriting filled neat rows of numbers, dates, and initial marks. Even simple tasks like tightening lids, tying bundles of cloth together, or wrapping fragile tools became significant contributions when done with care. Some disabled workers assisted in preparing outgoing shipments. They arranged items on tables, grouped them according to destination, and wrote shipping details that guided transport clerks. Even if they couldn't load trucks, they made sure everything was ready for the men who could. Their precise organisation often determined whether a shipment travelled smoothly or arrived missing items. Others managed stock rotation, checking which supplies were used most frequently, and ensuring older stock was moved forward. This work required more thinking than lifting, and many disabled men excelled at it, developing personal systems to keep shelves from becoming cluttered. Some became experts in locating rare or hard-to-find items, their memory for storage layouts helping officers retrieve what they needed quickly. There were also quieter corners of these depots dedicated to maintenance of materials. A man who struggled with mobility could still fold uniforms, inspect boots for wear, or clean tools that had been returned for refurbishment. Some workers with visual impairments sorted items by texture, shape, or size, adapting tasks creatively to match their abilities. Over time, camaraderie formed in these spaces. Able-bodied workers respected their disabled colleagues for their steady reliability. Supervisors noticed who always caught errors, who remained calm during busy hours, who kept their stations organised even on hectic days. And though these men rarely wore medals or faced danger, they understood how deeply their work mattered. A soldier in the field depended on the unseen hands that packed his rations, the clerk who ensured his coat was the right size, the quiet worker who double-checked his medical kit. These small acts rippled outward in ways that could never be fully measured. At the end of each shift, as depot lights dimmed and workers headed home, many disabled men felt a sense of quiet pride. They might not have marched on front lines, but they kept the war effort breathing smoothly, ensuring that every unit, near or far, had what it needed. And in the slow, steady world of supply depots, their service found a meaningful and lasting place. Another quiet but essential world opened itself to disabled men during the war. The realm of transport documentation and route verification, a place where accuracy mattered more than physical movement, and where a calm mind could prevent confusion across entire regions. While trucks, trains, and supply convoys moved constantly across the country, someone had to create the paperwork that guided them, check the routes they followed, and ensure that every driver and every shipment had the right instructions. Disabled men, especially those with backgrounds in clerical or planning work, stepped naturally into these roles. Their desks were covered in stacks of manifests, route cards, fuel logs, and weather updates. A man with limited mobility might sit at a large wooden table for hours, comparing two maps to confirm which roads were safest that week. Another, who struggled with lifting objects, could still record shipment codes in neat lines, ensuring that nothing got mixed up during transit. Some men specialised in preparing convoy packets, bundles of documents that contained everything a driver needed: destination notes, emergency contacts, hazard warnings, and lists of items loaded into each truck. These packets had to be clear and error-free. A single wrong digit could send a vehicle miles off course. Disabled clerks approached this work with steady focus, checking each number twice and placing the finished packets into envelopes with quiet care. Others monitored road reports. They received updates from engineers and police officers about bridges under repair, roads damaged by heavy weather, or new detours around construction sites. A disabled worker might pin coloured notes on a large wall map, marking areas to avoid or highlighting the safest routes for that day's shipments. Their observations shaped the decisions of dispatch officers who relied on this information to plan safe, efficient travel for hundreds of vehicles. Some disabled men also handled communication between transport hubs. They answered telephones, wrote down brief messages, and relayed information about delays, early arrivals, or mechanical issues. Their calm, steady voices helped drivers who called in confused or uncertain, guiding them patiently until they knew exactly where to go. In many offices, disabled workers maintained fuel logs, long lists that recorded how much gasoline or diesel each vehicle used. This information helped commanders plan supply needs weeks in advance. These logs were detailed, sometimes stretching across several notebooks, and required someone who could keep track of dozens of entries without losing focus. Disabled clerks often excelled at this, their careful writing turning scattered reports into clear records. There were also tasks involving permits and identification documents. Every convoy needed authorization papers, and disabled men printed, stamped, and organized these permits. Some prepared identification cards for temporary drivers joining the war effort, adding photographs, signatures, and official seals. A few disabled workers, especially those with strong memory skills, became experts at verifying lists of names, ensuring that each driver had the correct clearances. In quieter corners of transport offices, disabled volunteers worked on filing systems. They created labelled folders, sorted paperwork into chronological order, repaired worn documents with small pieces of tape, and kept older records safe for future reference. Their organisation provided stability in an environment where documents moved constantly between hands. Over time, these men became trusted guardians of clarity. When an officer couldn't find a report, he often went straight to the disabled worker, who always knew where everything lived. When drivers came in confused by new instructions, it was often a disabled clerk who patiently explained the route step by step. And when convoys departed at dawn, leaving behind rooms filled with quiet paperwork, many disabled men felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had guided movement across miles, not with strength, but with steadiness, precision, and the confidence that comes from being needed in exactly the way they were. Amid the many hidden roles disabled men filled during the war, perhaps one of the most quietly impactful was their contribution to medical logistics and patient support, a world that required compassion, precision, and calm steadiness more than physical strength. Hospitals, field clinics, rehabilitation centres, and convalescent homes all depended on people who could keep supplies flowing, records organised, and recovering soldiers comforted through long, uncertain days. Disabled men stepped into these spaces with a natural gentleness that soon became indispensable. Many began their days in medical supply rooms. Shelves were lined with bandages, syringes, disinfectants, medicines, and countless items that had to be carefully tracked. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably at a sorting table and package bandages into bundles for nurses. Another who couldn't lift heavy boxes still checked expiration dates, cleaned empty containers for reuse, or prepared lists of items that needed restocking. Their calm attention ensured that medical teams always had what they needed. Some disabled workers handled patient records, a task that demanded accuracy and confidentiality. They updated charts with new treatments, recorded changes in symptoms, and filed reports sent from different wings of the hospital. These quiet clerks helped doctors and nurses stay informed, preventing mistakes and keeping care consistent. Others were assigned to reception desks, where their steady presence soothed anxious families and incoming patients. They answered questions gently, directed visitors to the right rooms, and maintained visitor logs. Their friendliness became a familiar comfort in places often filled with worry. Rehabilitation centres also welcomed disabled volunteers, especially those who understood recovery firsthand. Some led simple indoor exercises for soldiers regaining mobility, encouraging them without pressure. A volunteer who had lost partial use of his own limbs might demonstrate how to adjust movements, offering advice born from lived experience. These interactions created a sense of shared understanding that helped patients feel less alone. Disabled men also helped maintain quiet order in recovery wards. They distributed water, adjusted pillows, read letters aloud to soldiers who struggled to write or see clearly, and sometimes just sat beside someone who needed quiet company. For many recovering soldiers, these moments mattered more than grand gestures. Even those unable to walk long distances found ways to help, cleaning small instruments, preparing trays, folding blankets, or wheeling carts of fresh linens to nearby rooms. Some worked as hospital messengers, covering short routes between departments to deliver updates, test results, or medication lists. Their reliability built trust, and nurses often relied on them during busy hours. In pharmaceutical rooms, disabled clerks counted pills, labelled bottles, and organised storage drawers with steady precision. Their careful work ensured that dosages remained accurate and medicines reached the right hands. Over time, these men became part of the emotional fabric of the hospitals they served. Staff appreciated their patients. Patients appreciated their kindness. Their disabilities, once seen as limitations, became reminders that healing took many forms and that strength wasn't only found in physical ability. At the end of each shift, as hallways quieted and lights dimmed, these volunteers walked or wheeled themselves home knowing they had lightened someone's burden, even if only for a moment. And in the gentle rhythm of medical support, the soft steps, the quiet voices, the careful hands, disabled men found a place where their presence brought genuine comfort in a world that desperately needed it. Another often overlooked place where disabled men found meaningful service during the war was in the calm, structured world of educational outreach and instructional media, a realm built on teaching, guiding, and sharing knowledge with those who would soon find themselves supporting the war effort in their own ways. As communities adjusted to wartime life, people needed instruction on safety measures, rationing rules, first aid basics, home preparedness, and countless small skills that helped society function smoothly. Disabled men, many of whom possessed strong communication skills or a background in teaching, stepped naturally into these roles, shaping information that reached millions. Some worked on creating instructional pamphlets, small, clear booklets explaining topics like food conservation, home fire prevention, map reading basics, or how to identify different types of aircraft. A man who couldn't stand for long periods could sit comfortably at his desk, drafting simple explanations and illustrations. Another who struggled with mobility helped edit text so that readers of all ages could understand it. Their words became tools that empowered families, workers, and volunteers across the country. Others recorded radio segments. Radio was one of the most powerful communication tools of the era, and many disabled men had calm voices well suited to steady, reassuring broadcasts. They read instructions during civil defense drills, offered reminders about blackout times, or shared updates about ration changes. Their gentle tone helped listeners feel supported rather than overwhelmed, especially during stressful periods. Some disabled men assisted in producing training films, not by acting, but by writing scripts, organising scenes, or managing equipment. These films taught workers in factories how to handle machinery safely, instructed volunteers on first aid techniques, or showed new recruits the basics of using communication devices. A man who couldn't handle heavy cameras could still coordinate filming schedules or review footage for accuracy. In community centres and schools, disabled volunteers gave talks to small groups. They explained how to build emergency kits, demonstrated how to identify warning signals, or taught children how to stay safe during air raid drills. Their patience made them natural educators, and many children grew comfortable asking them questions that they were too shy to ask others. Others organised small libraries dedicated to wartime learning. Shelves were filled with books about farming, mechanics, chemistry, and home nursing. Disabled men catalogued each volume, created checkout systems, and guided visitors toward the resources they needed. Their presence kept these small centres running smoothly, transforming them into hubs of local knowledge. Some took on correspondence roles, responding to letters sent by civilians who had questions about safety or volunteering. They wrote thoughtful replies, often customizing explanations based on the writer's needs. These exchanges helped families far from major cities feel connected and informed. Even disabled men with limited hand mobility contributed by dictating information to typists, ensuring that their knowledge still reached others. Over time, this quiet educational network grew into a powerful force. The information shared through pamphlets, lessons, broadcasts, and films shaped the daily habits of communities everywhere. Families learned how to stay safe. Workers learned how to be efficient. Volunteers learned how to support one another. And behind so much of this guidance were disabled men who had once wondered if the war effort had room for them at all. In the steady rhythm of teaching and informing, they found a place where their abilities shone naturally, a place where they helped entire communities face uncertainty with confidence and calm. As the war carried on, yet another meaningful role emerged for disabled men, a quiet but vital presence in the world of community rationing and resource management. Food, fuel, fabric, rubber, and countless everyday items were no longer guaranteed. Households received ration books, factories needed careful planning, and local boards had to keep track of what supplies were available. This system required people who were steady, patient, and willing to manage details that rarely made headlines, but shaped the rhythm of daily life. Disabled men, many with backgrounds in accounting, shopkeeping, or public service, stepped naturally into these positions. Ration offices were calm, paper-filled spaces with long counters, drawers stacked with forms, and shelves holding stacks of coupon books. A man who couldn't stand for long could sit comfortably behind a desk and help residents understand their allowances. Another with limited mobility could manage the flow of paperwork, sorting applications into neat piles, checking names against registries, and ensuring each family received the correct number of coupons for essentials like sugar, flour, or gasoline. Some disabled workers handled verification tasks, confirming addresses, family sizes, and employment details to determine ration amounts. Their careful checks prevented shortages and ensured that supplies reached those who needed them most. They maintained ledgers filled with neat lines of numbers, dates, and signatures, creating order in a process that could easily have become chaotic. Others managed distribution day. Residents formed lines that stretched down hallways, waiting to collect new ration coupons or exchange old ones. Disabled clerks spoke with calm clarity, explaining how long each booklet would last, or how to use special stamps for items like meat or canned goods. Their steady presence reassured people who often felt anxious about having enough to feed their families. A number of disabled men also helped organise ration-related community events. They oversaw educational booths that taught people how to stretch their supplies, how to grow vegetables in small gardens, or how to repair worn clothing instead of replacing it. Some prepared posters that reminded families to use food wisely, to avoid waste, or to turn in spare materials for recycling. Their quiet creativity inspired many to adopt new habits. In fuel management offices, disabled men recorded the distribution of coal, kerosene, or heating oil. They tracked deliveries to ensure that homes stayed warm during winter. Their notes guided workers who handled physical distribution. A man unable to lift heavy items could still determine which neighbourhood needed priority during cold spells. Some assisted in managing scrap drives, collecting metal, paper, rubber, and other materials needed for manufacturing. While they couldn't move heavy bags, they inspected donations, sorted items into categories, and kept track of community contributions. Many towns relied on their organisation to meet national collection goals. Disabled volunteers also helped families who struggled with rationing. They read letters from elderly residents who couldn't visit the office, then arranged for delivery of ration books to their homes. They patiently explained rationing rules to newcomers or families with young children. Their kindness created a small sense of stability in uncertain times. Over the months, these men became central figures in their communities. Residents greeted them by name, knowing they were the ones who kept systems running smoothly behind the scenes. And although their work never reached the front lines, it supported every home, every kitchen, and every table touched by the war. In the soft shuffle of papers, the quiet conversations, and the deliberate care of ration management, disabled men found a place where they could steady their communities, one coupon, one ledger, one thoughtful moment at a time. As the war reshaped every corner of society, disabled men found yet another meaningful place to serve. Within the calm and steady world of wartime correspondence, letters became lifelines during these years. Families wrote to soldiers, soldiers wrote home, officials exchanged reports, and communities shared updates across great distances. Behind this immense web of communication stood thousands of workers who sorted, stamped, recorded, and redirected mail with remarkable patience. Disabled men, particularly those who could sit for long periods and concentrate on repetitive tasks, became essential in keeping the system moving smoothly. Military post offices were quiet but busy environments filled with canvas bags, wooden sorting tables, and shelves lined with incoming and outgoing bundles of letters. A man with limited mobility could sit at one of these tables and separate envelopes by region. Another who struggled with lifting heavy objects could still handle smaller stacks, checking each address carefully before placing it into the correct bin. Their thoroughness prevented countless letters from being lost or undelivered. Some disabled workers specialised in censoring mail, a task that required focus and discretion. They read through letters written by soldiers, checking for sensitive information that could accidentally reveal troop movements or strategic details. These men approached the job with a thoughtful touch, ensuring safety without disturbing the personal tone of each message more than necessary. Their careful editing protected military secrecy while preserving families' connections. Others managed the tracking of parcels. Supplies such as socks, blankets, homemade snacks, and small comforts from home were sent to soldiers across oceans. Disabled clerks recorded each parcel's details in large ledgers, noting its weight, its destination, and the name of the sender. They affixed routing labels and stamps, ensuring each package reached the correct ship or train. Their calm precision kept thousands of families connected with their loved ones far away. Some disabled men worked at community post stations, assisting civilians who weren't familiar with mailing procedures. They explained how to fill out military address forms, or how to package delicate items for long journeys. Their gentle guidance eased the worries of mothers, wives, and children who wanted their letters to arrive safely. In larger dispatch centres, disabled volunteers monitored the arrival times of mail trains. They recorded delays, updated chalkboards listing departure schedules, and communicated changes to smaller postal units. Even men who could not move easily across the room managed these tasks from stationary desks equipped with telephones and document trays. Their coordination kept the entire postal system organised. Others handled undeliverable letters, envelopes with unclear handwriting, incomplete information, or misprinted names. Disabled clerks used magnifying glasses, address directories, and military lists to determine the correct recipient. Their patient research reunited countless letters with soldiers who might otherwise have never received them. Some disabled workers added a human touch to their roles, reading letters aloud to soldiers recovering in hospitals or helping patients dictate replies. These quiet acts of empathy became cherished comforts during long months of recovery. Over time, the presence of disabled men in correspondence departments became not only normal, but deeply appreciated. Their steady focus, gentle communication style, and willingness to handle detailed tasks kept the emotional heartbeat of the home front strong. For countless families, the arrival of a single letter, a few lines written in a familiar hand, brought hope, reassurance, and connection. And behind each of those moments stood workers whose service, though quiet, was woven into the very fabric of wartime life. Among the many quiet roles disabled men filled during the war, one of the most unexpectedly meaningful was their contribution to the world of public information desks and community guidance centres. These were small offices tucked inside town halls, libraries, school buildings, and local administrative stations. Their purpose was simple yet essential: to help ordinary citizens understand new regulations, find needed resources, and stay informed during a time when rules seemed to change with every passing month. Disabled men, many of whom had calm dispositions and strong communication skills, became the steady heart of these centres. Each morning, they arrived at desks neatly arranged with pamphlets, forms, pencils, maps, and notices pinned to softboards behind them. Some used wheelchairs, others walked with canes, and some preferred to remain seated for long stretches due to pain or limited mobility. But none of these differences mattered. What mattered was their ability to listen, to explain gently, and to guide people through whatever confusion they faced. Citizens came with all kinds of questions: how to register for ration books, what to do if a family member had been relocated for war work, how to volunteer for civil defence, or where to find assistance with lost mail or delayed shipments. Disabled clerks listened patiently, often repeating explanations as many times as needed. Their calm tone made even complicated rules feel manageable. Some workers handled maps for families needing to locate distant relatives serving in various regions. They pointed out bases, ports, and supply centres, offering reassurance without giving away sensitive details. Others helped people fill out official forms, applications for fuel allowances, relocation requests, or documentation needed for employment in essential industries. Many disabled men excelled at organising bulletin boards filled with notices. They updated them with new regulations, posted schedules for community drills, and replaced outdated information with fresh, clear instructions. This simple act of keeping the community informed prevented many misunderstandings. Some disabled volunteers ran phone lines inside these centres, answering calls from residents who couldn't leave home. They provided directions, read announcements aloud, or connected callers to the correct departments. Their steady voices became familiar comforts in uncertain times. A number of disabled men also prepared weekly newsletters summarising important updates. They typed carefully, arranged information into short sections, and distributed copies to schools, shops, and community halls. These newsletters helped people stay organised as the war continued to shift daily routines. In moments when families arrived overwhelmed, unsure how to navigate new paperwork or nervous about deadlines, these clerks offered reassurance simply by being patient and present. Their tasks may have seemed small, but the impact rippled outward. Every clarified instruction prevented confusion. Every filled-out form ensured someone received what they needed. Every calm explanation helped a worried parent breathe easier. Over time, these information desks became places of quiet stability, and the disabled men who staffed them became trusted guides. Their ability to remain composed, kind, and thorough made them invaluable in a world that often felt uncertain. Through their steady presence, they helped entire communities stay grounded. One question, one explanation, and one gentle moment of clarity at a time. Another quiet but essential realm where disabled men found purpose during the war was the world of identification, permits, and civilian documentation, a system that touched nearly every person on the home front. As the war progressed, daily life required more official papers than ever before: work permits, travel passes, volunteer registrations, ration cards, blackout compliance forms, and certificates for essential industries. These documents ensured that communities stayed organised and that resources were distributed fairly. Disabled men, with their patience and steady focus, became the unseen hands keeping this paperwork flowing smoothly. In small offices with wooden desks, typewriters, shelves of blank forms and metal stampers, they carried out tasks that demanded clarity and precision. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably behind a counter, checking identification documents and confirming names against registry books. Another who struggled with heavy lifting could still type certificates, stamp approval seals, and record serial numbers into long ledgers. Their work, though quiet, shaped the daily routines of thousands. Some disabled clerks handled travel permits, which were required for trips beyond certain distances. They listened to residents explain why they needed to travel, for work, family emergencies or supply collection, and then reviewed whether each request met the guidelines. Their calm explanations helped people understand restrictions without feeling overwhelmed. Others managed workplace registrations for essential industries. Factories often needed to verify that employees were officially cleared for wartime labour. Disabled workers processed these forms, checked signatures, and filed them neatly so employers could retrieve records when needed. Their orderly systems prevented delays that might slow production. Many were responsible for issuing volunteer badges used by civil defence workers, medical helpers, fire watchers, and community organisers. They prepared laminated cards, attached small photographs, and ensured that every badge matched its corresponding record. This attention to detail helped local authorities confirm who was authorised to assist during emergencies. Some disabled men specialised in updating and renewing documents. Ration cards needed periodic replacement. Volunteer permits expired. Travel passes changed with shifting regulations. These workers explained new rules gently, helping residents avoid confusion. Their patient demeanour often made long lines feel more manageable. Others supervised filing rooms where thousands of documents were stored in labelled drawers. They organised forms by date, location, or category, keeping everything accessible. When officials needed to review a resident's history or confirm a worker's status, these clerks always knew exactly where to find the correct file. Many disabled volunteers also prepared reports summarising document activity, how many permits had been issued, how many renewals processed, or which neighbourhoods required additional forms. These summaries guided local leaders in planning resources for the weeks ahead. In moments of heightened concern when rules tightened or new policies were announced, disabled workers played a crucial role in helping communities adjust. They translated complex regulations into simple explanations, reassured worried families, and made sure every person received the correct papers. Over time, these documentation offices became quietly efficient centres of order, and the disabled men who staffed them became trusted figures in their communities. Their calm presence, careful handwriting, and steady organisation brought clarity to a world filled with constant change. Through each verified form and stamped permit, they helped keep daily life running, proving once again that meaningful service often happens far from the spotlight, in the quiet spaces where patience makes all the difference. As the war continued to reshape everyday routines, disabled men found another important place to serve, in the calm but crucial world of material inspections and quality checks. Every item sent to soldiers, from boots and jackets to mess kits and medical tools, needed to meet specific standards. A single weak seam or faulty clasp could cause problems far from home. Factories were busy, workers hurried, and production lines were constantly in motion, which meant small mistakes could easily slip through. Disabled men, with their patient eyes and steady hands, became the quiet guardians of quality who ensured that these mistakes didn't reach the field. Inspection rooms were quieter than the main factory floors. Tables were lined with rows of finished items waiting to be checked. A man with limited mobility could sit comfortably at one of these stations, examining each object with slow, deliberate care. Another who couldn't lift heavy loads could still test latches, button coats, or look closely for cracks in metal tools. Their task was simple but vital. Find anything that didn't meet standards, mark it clearly, and send it back for repair. Some inspected fabric goods, coats, gloves, blankets, and uniforms. They checked stitching, pulled gently on seams, and smoothed fabric with their palms to find weak spots. Others specialized in equipment. They clicked buckles open and shut, tested the elasticity of straps, or examined canteens for leaks. Their calm pace allowed them to notice small details that busy workers might miss. A few disabled inspectors worked in medical supply centres, checking syringes, bandage rolls, and small surgical tools. These items required an especially careful eye, and the men handled them with measured, respectful movements. Some reviewed packaging, ensuring instructions were readable and that items were sealed properly. There were also men who oversaw the measuring of items like rope, wire, or cloth. They didn't need physical strength, only accuracy as they compared lengths to standard markings. Others verified weights using small scales, ensuring that shipments matched the required amounts. Even those with limited vision contributed, using their sense of touch to detect uneven surfaces or structural flaws. Over time, these inspectors became known for their reliability. Supervisors depended on them to keep standards high, and factory workers trusted their judgment when items were returned for correction. Their work rarely received public attention, but soldiers benefited from it every day, wearing uniforms that lasted longer, using tools that didn't break easily, and relying on equipment they knew they could trust. For many disabled men, inspection work offered a sense of purpose. It was calm, steady, and filled with quiet responsibility. And at the end of each shift, as they placed the last approved item onto a growing pile, they felt the soft satisfaction of knowing that their careful hands had made someone's life a little safer, even if that someone was thousands of miles away. As the war reached deeper into everyday life, disabled men found another meaningful role in the peaceful world of repair stations dedicated to restoring worn or damaged civilian items. These were small workshops set up in towns and neighbourhoods, quietly supporting the home front by extending the life of objects that families could no longer easily replace. With rationing strict and new goods scarce, repairing what already existed became an essential service. Disabled men, especially those with backgrounds in trades, craftsmanship, or simple handiwork, stepped naturally into these positions. Repair stations were calm places filled with the scent of oil, wood shavings, and warm metal. A man who couldn't stand for long periods could sit at a bench and mend broken handles on pots, tighten loose hinges on household tools, or sand down rough edges on small furniture pieces. Another who had limited arm strength could still patch torn cloth, replace missing buttons, or mend small leather goods. Many focused on household necessities, mending kettles, fixing lamps, repairing garden tools, or restoring children's shoes. Their hands moved slowly and deliberately, turning damaged objects into items families could rely on again. A soldering iron or a simple needle became tools of quiet service. Others specialized in repairing items related to civil defense. They tightened straps on helmets, fixed cracks in handheld lamps used for blackout patrols, or realigned frames on small radios that families depended on for important broadcasts. Their careful work kept the community prepared and safe. Some disabled workers repaired bicycles, which were essential for those who needed to travel when fuel was rationed. They adjusted chains, patched tyres, and straightened bent spokes. This work was steady and predictable, allowing men with physical limitations to handle tasks at their own pace. Others maintained school supplies and public equipment, things like broken desks, loose chalkboard frames, or damaged storage boxes. These repairs helped keep classrooms functioning when replacement items were hard to find. There were also repair tables dedicated to clothing. Disabled men who had worked as tailors or cobblers before the war found new purpose here, sewing torn coat linings, fixing zippers, or patching worn sleeves. Even simple repairs helped families stretch limited resources. Many stations accepted community donations of broken items, encouraging residents not to discard anything that still had potential use. Disabled workers sorted these donations into piles, repairable, parts only, and scrap. Their judgment guided how materials were reused and kept waste to a minimum. Over time, these repair stations became places of comfort for communities, small sanctuaries where people could bring their worries in the form of broken objects and leave with something renewed. And for the disabled men who worked there, the slow rhythm of fixing, polishing, tightening and restoring became a way to serve with dignity and steady devotion. Each repaired item carried a piece of their quiet contribution, touching homes and lives in ways that often went unnoticed but never lacked meaning. Another quiet but deeply meaningful place where disabled men contributed during the war was the world of community agriculture support, small local programs designed to help families grow food when rationing tightened. With many able-bodied farmers drafted and supply shipments under pressure, towns increasingly relied on victory gardens and shared plots to fill the gaps. These gardens didn't demand the heavy labour of full farming. Instead, they needed organisation, planning, teaching, and gentle maintenance. Roles perfectly suited for disabled men who wanted to serve but couldn't manage physically intense work. Many communities turned unused lawns, public parks, and small empty fields into growing spaces. Disabled men helped oversee these areas, guiding volunteers on how to plant, water, and harvest crops. A man who couldn't walk long distances could still sit on a stool at the edge of a plot, explaining how deep seeds should be placed, or how often soil needed turning. Another who struggled with lifting tools could teach families how to recognize plant diseases or how to rotate crops to keep soil healthy. Some disabled volunteers managed seed distribution. They organized packets of beans, carrots, cabbage, and other essentials, then handed them out to families along with simple instructions. Their patience made them natural teachers, especially when helping beginners who had never planted anything before. Others focused on watering schedules. They arranged timetables so each family knew when they could use shared pumps or watering cans. Their organised systems prevented overcrowding and ensured every garden received the care it needed. Some monitored weather reports and posted daily notes reminding residents when frost was coming or when extra protection for plants was needed. Many disabled men also maintained small tool sheds where communities stored shared rakes, shovels, and hoes. They repaired handles, sharpened blades, and labelled each tool neatly. Even if they couldn't use some of these items themselves, they ensured others could rely on them. In addition to tending gardens, disabled workers helped organise small harvest events. They weighed vegetables, recorded totals, and prepared baskets for families who needed extra food. Some coordinated donations to hospitals or shelters, turning local harvests into quiet acts of generosity. A number of disabled men offered indoor support during planting seasons. From community centres, they answered questions, prepared simple charts showing which plants grew best in certain soils, or demonstrated how to store vegetables through winter. Their steady guidance helped beginners grow confident in their efforts. Perhaps most meaningful was the sense of community these gardens created. Children, parents, elderly residents, and volunteers worked together, often stopping to speak with the disabled workers who organised the space. These conversations brought warmth into daily routines and reminded everyone that service wasn't defined by physical capability. Over time, many neighbourhoods grew not only vegetables, but also a sense of connection and resilience. And at the centre of this quiet strength were the disabled men who gave their time, knowledge, and calm presence to keep these small gardens flourishing. One seed, one lesson, and one gentle moment at a time. As the war continued to reshape communities, disabled men found yet another meaningful way to contribute, through assisting in local transportation hubs that helped civilians navigate new schedules, restrictions and shortages. These hubs included small bus depots, train stations, and regional travel points where the flow of passengers relied heavily on clear communication and steady organisation. While the physical demands of lifting luggage or maintaining vehicles were handled by others, the essential work of guiding travellers, posting updates, and keeping operations orderly became a perfect fit for many disabled volunteers. Each morning, these hubs opened with a soft rhythm, the shuffle of shoes, the murmur of conversations, the distant ring of a station bell. Disabled men took their places behind counters or at small desks positioned near entrances. A man who couldn't stand long could still sit comfortably and answer questions about train times or bus routes, pointing out delays or schedule changes. His calm voice often helped travellers feel at ease amid the uncertainty of wartime travel. Others managed the bulletin boards that listed arrival and departure times. They updated signs with chalk or swapped printed cards as schedules shifted. Their attention to detail prevented confusion when trains were rerouted to carry troops or when buses were reassigned for essential workers. Some disabled workers assisted passengers who struggled with complex travel forms. Wartime restrictions meant that many trips required documentation, and these clerks patiently explained which permits were needed. Their steady guidance helped families avoid mistakes that could delay journeys. In quieter corners of the station, disabled volunteers organised lost and found departments. They sorted abandoned items, gloves, small bags, children's toys, and recorded them carefully in logbooks. Their calm method ensured that when someone returned searching for a lost object, it could often be found. Others kept track of freight deliveries unrelated to military operations. They logged crates of food, mail sacks, or personal shipments into neat records. Even if they couldn't move the crates, they could document them accurately, ensuring nothing went missing. Some disabled men served as message runners within the station, covering short, manageable distances to deliver written notes from one office to another. Their reliability made them trusted members of the staff. A number helped elderly travellers and mothers with small children, not by lifting luggage, but by offering clear directions, reading signs aloud, or helping them fill out travel slips. Their kindness became a quiet source of comfort. Even small tasks like organising ticket stubs or distributing simple maps mattered greatly when stations grew crowded. And many disabled workers found pride in creating calm within that movement, turning confusion into clarity one conversation at a time. As weeks turned into months, their presence became familiar to travellers. Faces recognised them. Voices greeted them. People trusted that if they asked a question, the answer would be patient, accurate, and reassuring. In a time when movement was uncertain and every journey carried weight, these disabled men kept the heart of local transportation gently beating, steady, dependable, and quietly essential. In yet another quiet corner of the war effort, disabled men found purpose in the world of community communication centres, small local hubs responsible for gathering, organising and sharing important information with residents. These centres acted as bridges between government announcements and everyday families, delivering clarity during a time when news changed rapidly and uncertainty filled the air. Disabled men, many with steady voices and strong organisational skills, became the guiding presence inside these communication rooms. Each day began with stacks of new updates, notices about ration changes, blackout rules, volunteer needs, or local safety alerts. A man who couldn't stand comfortably for long periods could sit at a neatly arranged desk, reading through each update and sorting it into categories. Another who had limited mobility could type summaries, turning long official documents into short, easy messages that communities could understand. Some disabled volunteers operated community bulletin boards. They pinned fresh notices each morning, carefully removing outdated ones. Their work ensured that every passerby saw the latest instructions without confusion. During evenings, they added handwritten reminders, gentle notes about drill schedules or weather concerns. Others prepared small circulars delivered to shops and schools. They cut paper, folded sheets, and organised piles for volunteers who distributed them door to door. Even simple tasks like addressing envelopes or stamping dates mattered greatly when hundreds of homes depended on these updates. Many communication centres also handled telephone lines used by residents seeking guidance. Disabled men answered these calls with patience, explaining everything from ration rules to shelter locations. Their calm manner reassured callers who might otherwise feel overwhelmed. Some disabled workers monitored radios for regional announcements. They sat quietly, listening for changes, and wrote down new information as soon as it aired. Their quick notes helped local leaders respond promptly. A few assisted with community boards that tracked local volunteers, listing who could help with deliveries, who had medical training, or who had equipment to assist during emergencies. Their organisation allowed neighbourhoods to remain coordinated even in stressful moments. Disabled clerks also helped families decode official letters they received. War-related messages were often confusing, filled with formal language. These men read the letters aloud gently, explaining what each line meant and helping families understand how to respond. In moments of worry, their patients offered comfort. Some prepared daily information sheets for loudspeaker broadcasts used in towns without reliable radio access. They wrote short announcements that volunteers later read aloud from moving carts or rooftops. Through these simple scripts, disabled workers helped spread clarity to entire districts. Over time, these communication centres became anchors of stability. Residents trusted the men who worked there, knowing they would receive information that was accurate, timely, and easy to understand. For disabled volunteers, the work became a quiet form of service, rooted in clarity, kindness, and consistency. And in a world where confusion often caused fear, their steady hands and gentle explanations helped entire communities breathe a little easier each day. Another meaningful path opened for disabled men during the war inside the calm, methodical world of map sorting and cartographic assistance. While expert cartographers handled the technical drawing of military maps, there was an enormous amount of support work that required careful hands, patient focus, and the ability to stay organised for long stretches of time. Disabled men, many with backgrounds in clerical work, drafting, or simply a natural eye for detail, stepped into these roles with quiet dedication. Cartography rooms were peaceful spaces compared to busy factories or transport hubs. Large tables held stacks of maps, some freshly printed, others worn from repeated use. A man who couldn't walk easily could sit at one of these tables, flattening curled edges, checking labels, or sorting maps by region. Another who struggled with lifting could still mark small correction notes, attach reference tags, or compare two versions of the same map to make sure updates were consistent. Many began by organising incoming sets. Each delivery contained dozens of maps that needed to be counted, categorised, and stored. Disabled clerks created neat piles labelled by terrain type, transport routes, weather zones, or communication lines. Their steady organisation ensured officers could find the exact map they needed without delay. Some volunteers assisted with minor labelling tasks. They added handwritten notes, drew simple arrows to highlight new roads, or marked areas affected by weather or construction. These small adjustments helped other workers keep track of changing conditions. Others focused on repair. Maps were folded, unfolded, rolled, and sometimes torn from constant handling. Disabled men gently taped edges, reinforced creases, or mounted fragile maps onto thicker backing paper. Their careful repairs extended the life of essential documents that couldn't easily be replaced. A number of disabled workers handled distribution. They prepared map packets, grouping different sheets into sets required for specific training exercises or civil defence routes. Even if they couldn't carry heavy stacks, they used carts or sliding trays to move bundles from table to storage shelves. Some assisted with referencing, using index books to match map numbers with specific regions. Their memory for codes and labels made them invaluable when officers needed information quickly. Others updated logs, recording when maps were checked out, who borrowed them, and when they were returned. These meticulous records prevented important documents from going missing. A few volunteers monitored weather reports and added small symbols to maps used by civil defence teams, marking areas expected to flood or roads likely to freeze. Their additions helped families and volunteers navigate safely. As weeks passed, cartography rooms developed a rhythm shaped by these disabled workers. Quiet sorting, gentle smoothing of paper, the soft scratch of pencils, and the careful turning of pages. They brought structure to a system that might otherwise have fallen into confusion. And though their work didn't appear in newspapers or ceremonies, every neatly prepared map they touched played a part in keeping their communities safe, informed, and prepared. For the disabled men who served there, this work became a source of calm pride, proof that even the simplest, most patient tasks could hold deep importance in a world changed by war. Another quiet but deeply valuable space where disabled men found purpose during the war was within community training centres that taught practical home-front skills. These weren't military camps or industrial schools, but small local classrooms set up in libraries, church basements, and town halls. Their aim was simple: help civilians learn the everyday abilities needed to keep households running smoothly during shortages. Sewing, simple repairs, food preservation, safety routines, all became vital, and disabled men, especially those with experience in crafts or teaching, stepped naturally into these roles. Each day, these centres welcomed families looking for guidance. A man who couldn't stand for long could sit at a table and demonstrate how to mend torn shirts or patch worn elbows. His hands moved slowly but confidently, showing people how to save clothing instead of replacing it. Another disabled volunteer taught basic tool use: how to fix a loose chair leg, repair a cracked drawer, or tighten simple household fittings. Even if he couldn't lift heavy objects, he could explain techniques clearly and show how to work safely. Some disabled instructors taught canning and food storage. They guided families through steps of sterilizing jars, sealing lids, and preparing vegetables for long-term keeping. Their calm manner helped beginners feel comfortable tackling tasks many had never tried before. Others focused on fire safety and home precautions. Wartime conditions increased the risk of household accidents, and these men explained how to check wiring, manage candles during blackouts, or store fuel safely. Their steady voices reassured those who worried about protecting their families. In another corner of the centre, disabled volunteers supervised simple first aid lessons. They taught how to clean small wounds, wrap bandages, and recognise signs that required medical attention. Their demonstrations gave civilians confidence to handle minor issues without overwhelming local clinics. A number of disabled men organised resource boards, large displays showing where to find spare materials, which shops offered repair services, or which families were willing to exchange goods. Their ability to categorise information made these boards invaluable to busy households. Others wrote instructional notes and handouts. Their clear explanations, typed carefully on small sheets, allowed families to take lessons home and review them later. Even small diagrams drawn by disabled volunteers helped residents understand steps more easily. Some disabled instructors managed class schedules, signing up participants, arranging groups, and ensuring that materials were ready on time. Their organisation kept the centres functioning smoothly day after day. Many also offered quiet one-on-one help, assisting elderly residents or young mothers who needed extra attention to learn a skill. These gentle conversations often brought comfort as much as they brought knowledge. Over time, these community training centres became warm, steady places of learning, small islands of certainty in an unpredictable world, and at the heart of them were disabled men whose patience, clarity, and everyday wisdom helped their neighbours not only manage wartime life, but feel capable and supported within it. As communities continued adapting to wartime life, disabled men found another meaningful role in the gentle, steady world of community morale support, a network of small efforts that helped neighbours stay calm, hopeful, and connected. Although they couldn't serve on the front lines, many discovered they had the ability to lift spirits simply by offering guidance, companionship, and a reassuring presence during stressful times. In town halls, reading rooms, and small neighbourhood centres, they organised quiet gatherings where families could share news, exchange updates, or simply sit together without feeling alone. A man who couldn't walk easily might sit at a long wooden table, reading aloud from newspapers or short stories for those too anxious or tired to read themselves. His calm voice filled the room, offering a brief escape from worry. Another disabled volunteer kept a small corner dedicated to letter writing. He helped residents craft messages to loved ones serving far away, suggesting phrases when words were hard to find. People trusted him with their thoughts, and his gentle encouragement helped them express feelings they struggled to put onto paper. Some disabled men oversaw message walls, simple boards where families posted updates, requests for help, or small notes of encouragement. These boards became community notice points filled with warmth, reminders that no one was facing challenges alone. Others organised children's activity hours. They read stories, taught simple games, or supervised drawing sessions. Even men with limited mobility or chronic pain could lead these quiet activities, giving parents short moments of rest and bringing joy to children living through an uncertain time. Some managed small lending libraries filled with donated books. They kept shelves neat, recommended titles based on visitors' interests, and created peaceful spaces where people could sit and read. These rooms became havens where the outside world softened, if only for a little while. Disabled men also led small discussion groups where neighbours talked about concerns, shared coping strategies, or asked questions about wartime procedures. Their steady presence helped conversations remain calm and supportive. Others prepared comfort packages for families in need. Small bundles of tea, socks, handwritten notes, or simple treats. Even if they couldn't deliver the packages themselves, they coordinated the contents with quiet care. Many offered companionship to elderly residents, visiting them in short, manageable walks or receiving them at homefront centres. These visits reduced loneliness and brought comfort to those who struggled with isolation. Some disabled volunteers managed music corners, playing records or gently humming along. These simple moments of sound and familiarity softened long days. Over time, these small acts of kindness formed threads of support that held communities together. And though disabled men may not have marched or fought, they contributed something equally powerful, a steady emotional anchor that reminded everyone that even in the hardest moments, there was still connection, understanding, and gentle strength to be found. As the war pressed on and communities settled into long routines of uncertainty, disabled men discovered yet another meaningful way to serve, in the quiet, reflective world of historical documentation and local record preservation. While governments focused on large-scale military archives, towns and neighbourhoods realised they needed to keep track of their own stories, volunteer efforts, community projects, civilian struggles, and small victories that shaped daily life. Disabled men, especially those with patient minds and a love for detail, became the gentle guardians of these memories. They worked in small rooms of town halls or borrowed corners of local libraries, where desks were covered with notebooks, typed pages, event flyers, ration notices, and handwritten reports from community groups. A man who couldn't stand for long could sit comfortably and sort these papers into categories, ensuring every document found its place. Another who struggled with mobility could still interview residents, asking simple questions about their experiences, then writing down their words with calm attentiveness. Some created daily logs describing community events, scrap drives, blackout practices, school activities, and volunteer meetings. They recorded who participated, what challenges arose, and how neighbours helped one another. Their careful documentation preserved the spirit of the home front in ways official reports never could. Others collected letters, photographs, and small notes donated by families. They placed them in labelled envelopes or glued them onto pages of large community albums. These collections became treasured reflections of how ordinary people endured difficult days. A number of disabled volunteers typed summaries of important local moments, turning scattered memories into organised narratives. Their crisp, steady typing helped future readers understand how towns adapted, cooperated, and grew stronger together. Some oversaw oral history sessions. Residents would stop by during quiet afternoons to share stories of sending sons to war, of learning new skills, of working during shortages. Disabled workers listened closely, asking gentle questions and capturing every detail with respect. Others prepared small displays for community centres, arranging photos, clipped newspaper articles, and simple captions that reminded visitors of what they had achieved collectively. These displays strengthened morale and helped people feel proud of their efforts. There were also disabled men who kept track of local volunteer rosters, listing who contributed to civil defence, first aid, agriculture work, or transportation support. Their lists created a sense of unity, showing just how many residents played a role. Some organised preservation boxes where fragile documents were stored safely, protecting them from time, light, and dust. Even men with limited hand strength helped by tying bundles gently or sliding pages into protective sleeves. Over time, these local archives grew into quiet treasures, repositories of resilience, kindness, and everyday courage. And behind every page filed, every story captured, and every memory preserved stood disabled men who brought patience, gentleness, and a deep respect for the lives unfolding around them. Through their dedication, they ensured the quieter parts of history would never be forgotten. As the war neared its later years, disabled men found another unique role in supporting morale through creative contributions, small works of art, writing and design that helped communities stay hopeful. These weren't grand pieces displayed in galleries, but simple, heartfelt creations shared in local centres, schools, and volunteer halls. Disabled men who had once painted, sketched, written poetry, or crafted small items discovered that their talents could bring comfort during difficult times. In quiet rooms with tables covered in pencils, brushes, and paper, they created posters reminding neighbours about safety routines or upcoming community events. A man who couldn't walk easily could still sit comfortably and draw soft illustrations that made serious warnings feel less frightening. Another who struggled with lifting could write short, warm messages added to bulletin boards, gentle notes about staying strong or helping one another. Some disabled volunteers crafted small handmade cards for families with loved ones overseas. These cards featured simple drawings of home scenes, calm messages, or symbols of hope. For many families, receiving these cards felt like a moment of kindness in the midst of long months of waiting. Others prepared decorative covers for community newsletters, adding small touches of beauty to otherwise plain announcements. Their detailed borders, careful lettering, or thoughtful symbols helped turn everyday papers into something that lifted spirits. A number of disabled men wrote short stories or poems. They read them aloud at community gatherings or allowed local newsletters to publish them. These writings didn't focus on the war itself, but on quiet moments, sunsets, childhood memories, garden scenes, gentle reminders that life still held peace and meaning. Some created simple props or backdrops for small neighbourhood plays held to raise morale. Even if they couldn't build large structures, they painted soft landscapes on cloth or helped design costumes using leftover materials. Others crafted small wooden toys for children. These toys, carved from scraps and polished carefully, brought joy to young ones who rarely had access to new items during wartime restrictions. Many disabled artists participated in encouragement boards, where residents posted drawings, quotes, or messages meant to inspire others. Their contributions often stood out for their warmth and sincerity. Some volunteers prepared decorative envelopes for community mail drives, making letters look a little brighter as they travelled across town or to distant bases. Even disabled men who had not practiced art before discovered simple crafts they could enjoy, folding paper into small ornaments, knitting small scarves, or painting gentle watercolour scenes. Over time, these creative contributions became cherished parts of community life. They reminded families that beauty still had a place even in uncertain times. And for the disabled men who made them, the work offered calm, purpose, and a soft way to give hope to those around them. One brushstroke, one word, one handmade detail at a time. As the war finally began moving toward its end, one last quiet role emerged where disabled men made a lasting difference, helping communities transition from wartime strain back into something resembling ordinary life. Even before official announcements were made, preparations for the post-war world slowly unfolded in town halls, community centres, and small administrative rooms. These efforts required patience, organisation, and the ability to guide families through new routines after years of restriction, qualities disabled men had demonstrated throughout the entire conflict. Many worked in local reintegration offices, gently assisting families who expected loved ones to return home. A man who couldn't walk easily sat behind a desk, helping residents fill out forms for housing adjustments or employment support. His calm explanations eased the anxieties of mothers and wives who didn't know what changes to expect. Others organised information packets for returning veterans, simple guides outlining civilian job opportunities, community programmes, or medical services. Disabled clerks typed each page carefully, knowing these packets would help thousands begin their next chapter. Some volunteers oversaw resource redistribution, gathering unused materials like extra blankets, tools, or clothing to give to families who had struggled through shortages. Their organisation turned scattered supplies into meaningful help. Others coordinated community repair efforts. Schools, parks, and public buildings often needed small fixes after years of limited maintenance. Disabled men tracked which places required attention, scheduled volunteers, and made sure tools were distributed fairly. Their steady planning helped neighbourhoods recover without chaos. A number of disabled workers assisted in updating official records, marking which residents had served, which had relocated for war work, and which families required extra support. Their accuracy ensured that no one was overlooked in the transition. Some prepared welcome home boards listing the names of soldiers returning that week. These boards, posted in central squares, became emotional gathering points for families waiting anxiously for familiar faces. Others helped families write letters ahead of reunions, messages filled with gentle honesty, sharing news that might soften the adjustments when loved ones returned after years away. Many disabled men also contributed to community gatherings meant to rebuild a sense of peace. They arranged chairs, organised simple refreshments, and helped create spaces where neighbours could sit together again without the weight of constant worry. Some oversaw small memorial corners honouring those who would not return, arranging photographs and flowers with respectful care. Their work provided a place for quiet reflection during moments of grief. As restrictions eased, disabled volunteers guided residents through new routines, explaining how rationing would end, how certain rights were restored, or where to find updated information. Their patience remained a steady anchor as life slowly shifted back to normal. Over time, people recognised that these disabled men, who had served quietly throughout the war, were also essential in shaping the peace that followed. They had supported their communities not with force or movement, but with steadiness, clarity, and quiet resilience. And as the world exhaled and families reunited, their contributions remained woven into the gentle return of everyday life, a reminder that service takes many forms, and even the calmest efforts can leave a lasting mark.